Hello everyone, my name is Surreal Beliefs and welcome to a unit overview for Total War Warhammer's new DLC, Norsca. Havoc will be joining me as we go through each individual unit. We look at the stats and all of their tertiary information. Hey Havoc.
How you doing, everybody? So Surreal and I have looked over all the units, we've kind of done some talking, and we've compiled our top 5 list of Norsca units in the new update. We're looking at only the new units and going to take a look at their unit stats, kind of explain why we feel they're in the top 5 and give some scenarios in which you'd want to use them, maybe you want to keep away from them, things of that nature.
Right, and I know that we've had a little bit of an opportunity to look at the two factions here, which is Norsca and Wintertooth. What is your overall opinion, before we dive into all of the details and all the stats, what is your view of the faction thus far? Like, how do you feel like they really scale up in comparison to the other factions that have been presented in the game?
Well, for me, looking at all of the, playing a couple of few battles and looking at the stats, I think this is definitely one of the more flushed out unit factions, even for the whole game, like considering the original ones we started out with. They have a lot of benefits to them. They are very much an anti-monstrous, anti-fast kind of faction. They're meant to counter things that are quick and counter things that are extremely big.
Right, and what I did notice too is that over time, I really feel like creative assembly begins to really learn how to flesh out each individual faction. Creative assembly takes a little bit to get the ball rolling. They'll have the base game come out, but then they really begin to get it into high gear. And so each DLC that has come out, we've noticed that mechanics are a little bit more fleshed out. You have the 4 gods that you're able to pick from, and clearly we're going to have some things that are adopted to the Warriors of Chaos, I'm quite sure, later on. But like you were saying, what I have noticed about this faction is that they have such a intense ability to keep you in the fight. They are really just a dog eat dog type of faction. They want you to be in the dirt and mud with them the entire time because of their abilities like Frostbite, and they have great slugging lords like Wolfric and Throg. So it's by far, and I think for a lot of people, probably my favorite faction that I've seen in the game thus far. And here's one that a few people might disagree with, but I was very impressed with the actual elite line infantry of the Norscan faction. When I fought other factions with them, they had a lot of staying power, they had a lot of prowess, and just being able to slug it out for a long period of time. And that would be the Marauder Champions. They are relatively expensive, but because of the relative cheapness of all of your other units that you want to use, I mean, I'm not talking about all the giant monstrous creatures, you have a very solid backbone force here. So a Marauder Champion has 80 armor, which is 20 less than what you would have for a Warrior of Chaos, but they are cheaper. But they also have Rage. And if you look at Rage, it will give you in stage 1, 8 leadership, stage 2, another plus 12% to physical resistance, and for stage 3, plus 8 to melee attack, while keeping all of the previous benefits for a period of time too. So they get better over time, which means that they're just going to be even tougher for that fight. They have 100 men total. Their leadership is actually very high at 75. They are slow because they are armored at 35 speed. Their melee attack is 36, and their melee defense is incredibly high at 49, which means that if they have any buff to that, they're just going to be there slugging it out the entire time. And then of course you have the great weapon variant as well, and that's just the same form but with armor piercing. And you're not going to want them to fight on your front lines directly. You want them to flank whenever they can. They can fight for a period of time, but because, well, actually they have just as much armor as a champion. The only difference is that they can't really have a chance to block any type of missile attack, and they do cost 100 more. I'm not sure how you feel about them. I know that like there are cooler units than the champion, but I find that they're just kind of a get it done type of unit that I like to incorporate in army composition.
Right. Well, again, the advantage of the Marauder Champion with great weapons is the armor piercing, but a minus 21% melee defense definitely takes a hurt. Like that's almost half of their total value compared to the regular Marauder Champion. So, for instance, like I think it needs to be stated over and over again the benefits of Rage. Like, yeah, stage 1 takes 45 seconds, stage 2 takes 90 seconds, but you get that buff to leadership, depending on how quickly that leadership drops. you know, by stage 3, you're having plus 24 leadership, plus 24% physical resistance and 8 melee attacks. So if you have an armored shielded axe infantry unit like the champions, if you're able to keep them in there, they will hold that core, and they will be, I mean, not unbreakable, but they will be pretty daggum close to it with their armor values and leadership being so high as it is. All right, so for my favorite unit series are the Mammoths. And as CA has mentioned, as we've seen in the videos, the Mammoth is going to be the largest unit in the game, as well as having, when you get over to the higher tiers, the highest HP level of any unit in the game. We start out with the Feral Mammoths. They're not going to be as good as your War Mammoths and their variants, obviously. They haven't been tamed yet. They haven't been under the will of the Norskins, but they still do a lot of damage. They're armor piercing. They're obviously anti-infantry, and they do cause a lot of terror. Not that much armor, but their weapon strength makes up for it. Their charge bonus is rather high, and they actually are decently fast with a speed of 56. They of course have that siege attacker ability, which makes sense, and they cause terror and fear like all the other monster units do. We get into like the War Mammoths though. This is where they really start to shine. Even your base War Mammoth has a decent amount more health, significantly more armor, as well as a buff to leadership and melee attack. But the War Shrine is an interesting variant, and I'm excited to see how people use this in battle. For me, like Surreal and I were talking, for me, I would kind of keep the War Mammoth almost in the background until I know for sure that he wouldn't, you know, kind of be routed or killed, because the War Shrine ability, it does give you a buff to units around it. For 40 meters, it gives a constant augment of 10 leadership, which is going to allow your units to stay, which means they can then be they can use that rage ability better. They also have an augment, Giver of Glory, which causes fire damage or imbues fire damage, and then also has an unbreakable feature. So if there is a unit that you really need to hold a flank with, then you can use that Giver of Glory, help them stay there. But we get to the Soul Crusher. This guy is the beast of all beasts. He has again, almost 13,500 HP, 70 leadership, 70 armor. His speed is at the same actually as the Feral, and then you have an increase in melee attack and melee defense. This guy, I mean, it's not going to be easy to kill this, even with throwing everything. The only thing, obviously, you could even be a good counter for, as we mentioned in the previous thing, the Marauder Hunters. This would be a good target for those Marauder Hunters, right? Would be that War Mammoth, and that's really the only way you're going to take them down is with a lot of anti-large units. What do you think, Surreal?
Right. Yeah, I mean, their one weak point is that they're very large, which makes them a focal point for any force to try to take them down quickly. But here's the kicker for that. When you're busy trying to take down that mammoth that has over 12 to 13,000 health, depending on which one you pick, your entire army might be dead at that point. And you've got to spend so much time trying to kill it, and you have to kill it. If you do not get rid of this creature, it will stay there. And it attacks so quickly that it will kill at least over 100 in any fight. And I can guarantee that if you go into a fight and you let it linger at any point, it's just going to destroy. So yeah, you definitely need to take it down quickly and promptly. And to be blunt, like, unless I play a lot more and I figure things out, I don't know the proper meta on how to take these down. But yes, if you have another Norscan faction, which you pretty much need, having anti-large definitely whittle them down. And so yeah, they are one of the coolest units added to the game for size, for animations, and just for how much work they put into the overall detail of that unit.
Definitely.
Now we're going on to one of my favorite units for the entire Norscan faction. They're not special, they're not unique, and they're just not that pretty to look at, but they are damn good, and that would be the Marauder Hunter. Now, they have two variants here. We've got the ones with Javelins, and you have the ones that have axes, and they go crazy in battle. But let's go over the ones with Javelins to begin with. First off, they have anti-large. The entire theme of the Norscan faction is to hunt down large creatures, and they personify that role completely. So they're also a decent melee combatant. They can't go toe-to-toe with some knightly squad charging through their ranks. That's not true, no, but they can at least stay in a fight for a period of time if they have to be. So they have very low armor. They're meant to. They are hunters. And all of their stats are just really not that impressive. But what is impressive, again, is their anti-large abilities. And so whenever you focus on any large creature with your Marauder Hunters, it melts away completely. So you can have them in the back of your line. You can have them on a flank. They fire so quickly and they hit so hard that any large creature is going down quickly. So if you're fighting another Norsca faction and they bring in trolls or a frost worm, if you can protect them, they're going to be there melting down your foes. And I promise you, they are worthwhile to bring. They're only 400 gold, but what they can do in damage far exceeds their very cheap cost. And then over here, you have your Marauder Hunters that just have throwing axes. They have armor piercing, and they're decent melee combatants as well. So you want them to flank your foes in a fight. That can be kind of hard to manage because fights in Warhammer kind of devolve into weird little blobs all over the field. But if you can manage to get them on a flank of a foe, like a dwarf force, they can definitely do a lot of damage. But I will say that my favorite one, because of their cost and their power, would be the Marauder Hunter with a Javelin.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, your Marauder Hunters, the axe-throwing close quarters infantry variant, certainly has its place. But I mean, if you compare the stats, I mean, you're getting armor-piercing missiles with the Marauder Hunters, which is great. But the Marauder Hunters with Javelins, they have a much more extended range. They have twice the ammunition, a little bit higher missile damage, and especially at, 150 gold less, I would rather bring, 4 units or 5 units of Marauder Hunters with Javelins than even just 3 or 4 units of the Marauder Hunters, because it's just you can just field more of them for a lesser cost, and that definitely has its benefits. All right, so we have the Fimir Warriors. This is one of the more interesting units in the Norsca DLC. They're kind of all one-eyed reptilian creatures. The really cool thing about them is they're maces, but they are monstrous infantry unit. They are very heavily armored. They have an armor rating of 110, and if you're looking stats-wise, I think one of the main units, if you want to compare them to like Chaos, the Chosen Axe Infantry, they have an armor of 120, but anything else under that is 100. So they actually have a ton of armor that you're going to be able to use pretty effectively. Not to mention they have armor piercing attacks and armor sundering attacks, which means they're going to be able to break down other enemy armor. Leadership is relatively high. Melee attack actually does a magic attack as well. And then the weapon strength of 80, which of course is armor piercing. They just have a lot of really heavy things about them. Not the fastest units. They're Fimir Warriors with great weapons. You're not seeing much of a buff aside from the anti-large factor, because again, with other great weapons units, their kind of thing is their ability for armor piercing, but you already have that with the regular Fimir Warriors. So you'll see an increase in weapon strength, but a decrease in melee attack and melee defense. But again, they're going to be a very good anti-large unit. And then last, of course, the Regiments of Renown, the Miststalkers, they do see a pretty decent buff, as well as a couple of new kind of abilities. So an increase in leadership, increase in melee attack, and increase in melee defense. Overall, a very strong unit, not the fastest, but definitely a good hard-hitting, a good staying power unit.
Right, and that is really the big theme of this faction, is to be fast, but at times you do need someone who's able to brawl. So a Fimir Warrior, the base form of it is what you want to send in after any type of infantry group. They will mow them down incredibly fast. Do not think that just because they're the same type of creature that the great weapon will do the same thing. When you go against a group of soldiers on the field, they're not going to do as well. Their anti-large capabilities is where they need to be used at. So they're basically like the Dragon Ogre group with their great weapon variant of the Norscan faction. And so they're fairly cost effective because of how strong they are. They're big, but not too big where you have to worry about them just being shot down immediately. And the high armor does help out quite a bit. And they also have a cool little ability or passive trait called From the Mist, and it reduces any type of missile damage by 22%. So that means that if you need to get them into a flank, if you need to drive them in deep, you won't have to worry about them taking as much damage from ranged attacks. And unless they have armor piercing, they're going to do even less damage to a high armor unit by default. And that makes them just a very confident and powerful force to add to any type of army that you use for Norsca.
All right, so we're going to take a look at the Skin Wolves. These guys are kind of their own individual unit. They're anti-large. They have a frenzy attack as well as regeneration. Their armor isn't that great, but they make up for it in leadership and speed. Their melee attack's pretty decent, and they actually have a really good charge bonus. We then go to the upgraded version, the Skin Wolves that are armored, and this is where it gets really interesting, and to my opinion, where you'd always want to go if you can. because they get 70 armor. So that is an increase of 55 at the expense of only 10 speed. And if you're looking in multiplayer, you know, plus 150 gold coins, whatever you want to call it, I think is definitely always where you want to go. And then lastly, we get up to the Regiments of Renown, the Maws of Savagery. And these guys really shine. They get a buff to leadership. They have Vanguard deployment, which is awesome, as well as an increase in melee attack and melee defense. These guys are really insane, really fast, and can definitely tie up some units for you to allow to catch up to them.
Right. One thing that I really enjoyed about these skin wolves in any fight is one, how quick they are. That allows you to be all over the map. And so you're having to try to fend these guys off the entire time to keep them from your back lines. Not only can they go after your ranged troops incredibly fast, they can take down your horsemen, they can take down a dragon ogre very fast. I did use Knights of Bretonnia against them. I did use dragon to try to fight them. They were all torn down to shreds. Now let's go over a few unique things here for them. Much like the trolls, they also have a weakness to fire. They do have regeneration, but they do take 20% more damage to fire. So a great way to go after them is to use any type of fire damage. And not only do they have their base armor, which for the non-armored variant is very low, they do have a trait that gives them 20% against any type of physical damage at all. So by a default amount, they reduce damage no matter what. So whenever they do have that boost of armor for 150 more gold, they take a lot less damage.
It's true.
And I do want to go ahead and go over real quick the Skinwolf Werekin, and we are kind of like lumping these all in together because they're just variants of the same type unit entirely. But the Werekin, he's got an ability that gives everyone nearby plus 18 armor and 11% resistance to any missile attack, which means that if you have these guys working in a big ball, a big furry dog ball, which sounds a little bit strange, then you're going to be able to take down any type of large creature incredibly fast. And there's really not a lot that you can do about it unless your foe is able to pin them down in place, which is hard to do because they are few in number, which allows them to disengage pretty fast. It's not like having a group of over 50 knights who are stuck in a bog. So they are definitely, at least to me, in our top 5 of just the most effective units of Norsca.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially if you can figure out how to lump that Werekin in, give them even more armor, as well as, like you said, that missile reduction really makes them kind of a nice punching unit as well as a good flanking one.
All right, well, that'll wrap it up, everyone. I do hope that you did enjoy the video, and if you did enjoy the video, we'll definitely produce more content of this type of vein. And don't worry, if you look down below, you can find Havoc's channel and you can find mine as well. So if you want to sub to each of our channels, you can check us both out. We do a lot of Warhammer-based content, and we'll be doing more videos of this type in the future as well. Anything that you want to add, Havoc?
It's just really cool. I like this style of trying to do new things, bringing in kind of a collaboration for these quick videos. I'm excited for the new DLC. There are a lot of really good things about Norsca, and I'm excited to see what you guys do with it as well. So if you want to join either of our Discords, those will be in the description links as well. We both have spots where you can share screenshots, share stories, things of that nature. It'd be really, really exciting to see what you guys do as well.
Yeah, so in conclusion, why don't you share your top 5 units down below? And thank you for watching, and as always, until then.
Peace.